I'm sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at my phone screen, watching my entire world crumble in real time. 24 hours ago, I thought my biggest problem was being the family joke at dinner parties. 24 hours ago, I believed my wife Sarah loved me, despite my modest teacher's salary. 24 hours ago, I had no idea that her sister Emma's new billionaire boyfriend wasn't just mocking my income. He was planning to steal everything I'd worked for, including my marriage. My name is Lance, and 3 weeks before everything changed, I was grading 7th grade science papers in our cramped apartment when Sarah burst through the door with news that would shatter our peaceful life. Her younger sister Emma had called, practically squealing with excitement about her new boyfriend Marcus, who she described as successful beyond imagination. Emma wanted to bring him to the monthly family dinner at their parents' house in Scottsdale. Sarah bounced around our modest 2-bedroom place, chattering about how Emma finally found someone worthy of her after years of dating losers. I watched my wife's enthusiasm from our secondhand couch, noting how her eyes sparkled when she mentioned Marcus owned multiple businesses and drove expensive cars. Something cold settled in my stomach, though I couldn't identify why. Our apartment reflected our simple reality: furniture from garage sales, a television we'd bought on clearance 3 years ago, and my collection of science textbooks stacked wherever they'd fit. I drove a 12-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door, while Sarah's slightly newer Toyota Corolla served as our family's reliable transportation. We'd been married 3 years, and while money stayed tight on my teaching salary combined with Sarah's part-time yoga instruction income, we'd built what I thought was a solid foundation. The family dinner invitation arrived for the following Saturday at Robert and Linda's ranch-style home. Sarah's parents had worked honest jobs their entire lives, Robert managing accounts at a local bank for 30 years, Linda nursing at Phoenix General until retirement. Their house sat in a comfortable middle-class neighborhood, nothing fancy but well-maintained, with a pool in the backyard and Robert's prized vegetable garden. Saturday evening arrived with Arizona's typical spring warmth. We pulled into the familiar driveway in our modest Corolla, parking next to Jake's pickup truck. Jake, Sarah's older brother, worked construction and had married Tracy, a dental hygienist. Their 8-year-old daughter Sophie always brought energy to these gatherings, with her constant questions about everything from dinosaurs to space exploration. Then Marcus arrived. The sound reached us first, a deep, throaty rumble that made everyone step outside to look. A gleaming black Maserati pulled up, its chrome accents reflecting the setting sun. The engine's purr commanded attention as it settled into silence, and out stepped a man who looked like he'd walked off a magazine cover. Marcus stood at least 6 feet 2 inches tall, his broad shoulders filling out a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His skin held a healthy tan, and when he smiled, his teeth were so white they practically glowed. A watch that screamed expensive caught the light on his wrist, and his Italian leather shoes probably cost more than our rent. Emma clung to his arm like she'd won the lottery, beaming with pride as she introduced him to the family. Marcus's handshake was firm and confident, his voice smooth and cultured. When he turned those penetrating blue eyes on me and asked what I did for work, something in his expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "I teach middle school science," I said, trying to match his confident tone. Marcus chuckled, a sound that somehow managed to be both warm and condescending. "How noble of you, Lance. I've always admired people who chose passion over profit. It takes real character to pursue teaching when you could be making real money elsewhere." The comment hit like a subtle slap wrapped in false praise. Sarah squeezed my arm, but I noticed she didn't defend me or challenge his assumption that I was somehow settling for less. Inside the house, Linda had prepared her usual spread: pot roast with vegetables, fresh bread, and her famous apple pie. The conversation flowed around Marcus as he casually mentioned his penthouse downtown, complete with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. He described his vacation home in Aspen with the same casual tone someone might use to mention their favorite restaurant. Business has been incredible lately, Marcus said, cutting into his roast. I just closed a deal that'll net about $2 million in profit over the next 6 months. It's funny how money makes more money once you understand the game. Robert leaned forward with interest. What kind of business are you in, son? Investment consulting, primarily real estate development. I help wealthy clients multiply their portfolios through exclusive opportunities. Marcus's explanation sounded impressive, yet remained frustratingly vague. Throughout dinner, he kept making subtle references to people who think small versus people who understand wealth creation. Each comment felt aimed directly at me, though he never said my name. When Sophie asked about his car, Marcus laughed and ruffled her hair. Maybe when you grow up, you'll marry someone who can afford nice things for you, sweetheart. Not everyone has the vision to build real wealth. The dessert conversation took a turn that made my blood freeze. Marcus mentioned he was considering purchasing investment properties around Phoenix, including several apartment complexes. His eyes found mine across the table as he spoke. Actually, I've been looking at the complex where Lance and Sarah live. The numbers make sense for a complete renovation and rent restructuring. I might buy the whole place next month. He paused, letting that sink in, before adding with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "Maybe I'll give you folks a family discount on the new rental rates." Everyone laughed except me. The sound of their amusement felt like needles piercing my chest as I realized Marcus wasn't just showing off. He was demonstrating power over every aspect of my life, including where I lived. Sarah giggled along with the rest, seemingly oblivious to the threat her husband had just received. After dinner, the family migrated to the living room where Robert's leather recliners faced a large television. Marcus immediately commanded the space, pulling out his phone to share photos that made everyone gather around him like he was holding court. The images flowed past in a parade of excess, his yacht docked in San Diego Harbor complete with a helicopter landing pad. Pictures from inside a private jet where Marcus sat in cream-colored leather seats, champagne glass in hand. Screenshots of his bank account balances that made Linda gasp audibly. Photos with celebrities at exclusive events that had Jake asking for autographs. "This is from last month in Monaco," Marcus said, swiping to a picture of himself at a casino table surrounded by beautiful women. "I won about $50,000 that night playing poker, but honestly, it's just entertainment money to me now." Sarah sat mesmerized, her eyes growing wider with each image. I watched my wife's expression change as she absorbed this glimpse into a lifestyle that made our modest existence look pathetic by comparison. When Marcus showed pictures of his walk-in closet filled with designer suits, Sarah actually sighed wistfully. "It must be incredible to never worry about money," she said, glancing apologetically in my direction. The conversation shifted to Marcus's philosophy about success and wealth creation. He leaned back in Robert's favorite chair like he owned the place, gesturing expansively as he spoke about winners versus losers, and people who make excuses versus people who make millions. "The key is understanding that the world rewards results, not effort," Marcus explained. "You can work hard your whole life and stay poor, or you can work smart and become wealthy. It's all about mindset and opportunity recognition." When the topic turned to my work, Marcus's interest sharpened in a way that made me uncomfortable. He asked detailed questions about my curriculum, particularly when I mentioned teaching environmental science and climate change awareness to my students. Climate change. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing through the room. "Lance, buddy, that's a political hoax designed to control the economy and limit business growth. Real entrepreneurs understand that environmental regulations are just barriers created by politicians who never built anything themselves." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Actually, there's overwhelming scientific consensus that climate change is real and primarily caused by human activities. I have a master's degree in environmental science, and the research is quite clear. Marcus's smile turned patronizing. "I'm sure your textbooks say that, but I work in the real world where results matter more than theories. While you were spending years in classrooms, I was building companies and making millions. Experience trumps education every time." The family's reaction stung worse than Marcus's dismissal. Robert and Linda nodded along with his explanation, seemingly convinced by his confidence. Jake started asking Marcus for investment advice, wondering if construction workers could get involved in his business deals. Tracy mentioned how private school for Sophie would be wonderful if they could afford it. Everyone turned expectant eyes toward me, waiting for my response to Marcus's challenge. I tried explaining peer-reviewed research, scientific methodology, and the consensus among climate scientists worldwide. My words felt hollow against Marcus's charismatic certainty. "Look, Lance," Marcus interrupted. "I respect that you believe what you've been taught, but successful people learn to question authority and think independently. I dropped out of college my sophomore year to start my first company, and I've made more money than most PhDs will see in their lifetimes." The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning. I could feel my family's judgment, their embarrassment at my naive worldview compared to Marcus's practical success. Even Sophie looked confused, like she couldn't understand why her Uncle Lance was arguing with someone so obviously important. Sarah rescued me from further humiliation by pulling me into the kitchen under the pretense of helping with dishes. Her whispered words cut deeper than Marcus's public dismissal. "Lance, please stop making our family look bad. Can't you just agree with him and let it go? Everyone can see how successful he is, and you're making yourself look foolish by arguing." The hurt in her voice revealed something I'd been blind to. Sarah was ashamed of me, ashamed of our financial situation, our modest lifestyle, and now my stubborn insistence on defending scientific facts against Marcus's charismatic lies. When we returned to the living room, Marcus was describing his latest business venture with animated gestures. He'd apparently offered to pay for a family vacation to Hawaii, covering flights, hotels, and activities for everyone. The enthusiasm in the room was palpable as Emma squealed about snorkeling and Linda talked about finally seeing Pearl Harbor. "Everyone except Lance, of course," Marcus added with false sympathy. "Teachers probably can't get time off during the school year, right? Professional obligations and all that." The family eagerly accepted his generous offer without a second thought about excluding me. I sat there invisible while they planned their luxurious getaway, funded by a man who'd just spent the evening mocking everything I stood for. Emma chose that moment to announce her engagement. She and Marcus had been dating only 2 months, but she was glowing as she showed off a diamond ring that could have paid my salary for 6 months. Marcus explained how they'd fallen in love at first sight and decided not to waste time with long engagements. "I'm buying Emma a house in Paradise Valley," Marcus announced. "Something fitting for my future wife with a view of Camelback Mountain and plenty of space for entertaining." Paradise Valley was where Sarah had grown up before her family moved to their current neighborhood. She'd always talked about returning there someday, describing the manicured lawns and luxury homes with longing in her voice. Now, her younger sister would be living that dream while Sarah remained trapped in our cramped apartment. The evening ended with Marcus promising to include everyone in his business success. He spoke about investment opportunities that could change their lives, ways to multiply their savings through his exclusive connections. The family hung on his every word like he was offering salvation from their middle-class existence. As we drove home in our modest Corolla, Sarah's silence spoke volumes. She stared out the passenger window while I tried processing what had just happened. My own family had essentially chosen Marcus's version of reality over mine, seduced by his wealth and confident dismissal of my expertise. I'd never felt so small, so irrelevant, or so completely alone. The following morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood as I struggled through my usual routine. Sarah left early for her yoga classes without saying goodbye, barely acknowledging my existence as she grabbed her keys and water bottle. The coldness in our apartment felt more bitter than the spring chill outside. At Roosevelt Middle School, my 7th grade students immediately noticed my distraction during first period. Normally, I brought energy and enthusiasm to environmental science lessons, but today I could barely focus on explaining renewable energy sources. Marcus's dismissive voice kept echoing in my head, calling climate change a hoax, while my family nodded along. "Mr. Lance, are you okay?" asked Jennifer, one of my brightest students. You seem really sad today. I forced a smile and redirected their attention to our lesson about solar panel efficiency. These kids deserved better than a teacher wallowing in personal problems. They looked up to me for knowledge and guidance, unlike my own family who apparently preferred Marcus's version of wisdom. During lunch break, I sat alone in my classroom grading papers when Mrs. Anderson, our principal, knocked on my door. Her expression was unusually serious as she asked me to come to her office immediately. My first thought was that I'd done something wrong. Maybe my distracted teaching had prompted a complaint. Instead, I found a man in an expensive charcoal suit waiting in Mrs. Anderson's office. He was probably in his 40s with graying temples and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. His presence immediately commanded respect in a way that felt entirely different from Marcus's flashy confidence. "Lance, this is Detective William Hayes from the Financial Crimes Unit of the Phoenix Police Department," Mrs. Anderson said. "He'd like to speak with you about a matter of some importance." Detective Hayes shook my hand with a firm grip while studying my face intently. "Mr. Lance, I understand you recently met someone named Marcus who claims to be a successful businessman. I need to show you some photographs and ask if you recognize any of these individuals." He opened a manila folder and spread several police surveillance photos across Mrs. Anderson's desk. My blood turned to ice when I saw the third picture. It was unmistakably Marcus, though the name underneath read Martin Castellanos and listed his age as 34 instead of the 28 he'd claimed. "That's him," I said, pointing with a trembling finger. "That's my sister-in-law's fiancé, though he told us his name was Marcus." Detective Hayes exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Anderson before pulling out a thick file. "Mr. Lance, the man you know as Marcus is actually Martin Rodriguez from East Los Angeles. He's the subject of an ongoing investigation involving investment fraud, targeting elderly retirees across Arizona, Nevada, and California." The world seemed to tilt sideways as Detective Hayes explained Marcus's real business. He operated a sophisticated Ponzi scheme disguised as a luxury real estate investment fund, promising enormous returns on exclusive property developments that existed only on paper. His victims were typically wealthy retirees who trusted him with their life savings, only to watch their money disappear into offshore accounts. "His pattern is always the same," Detective Hayes continued. "He targets affluent families through social connections, usually by dating someone with access to their financial circles. He presents himself as wildly successful, gains their trust through extravagant displays of wealth, then convinces them to invest in opportunities that sound too good to pass up." I thought about Marcus's casual mentions of his yacht, his private jet experiences, his penthouse downtown. But he has all those expensive things. The Maserati, the designer clothes that watch, all rented or borrowed for appearances, Detective Hayes explained. He spends stolen money on props to steal more money. It's a cycle that continues until he's extracted everything possible from his current target area, then he moves on to a new city with a new identity. The detective showed me a map marking Marcus's previous locations. He'd operated in Beverly Hills under the name Michael Carbone, in Las Vegas as Marcus Williams, and in Tucson as Martin Castle. Each location showed a cluster of elderly victims who'd lost their retirement savings, their homes, their financial security. "We've been tracking him for 8 months, Detective Hayes said. He's incredibly careful, always staying just within legal boundaries until the moment he actually accepts investment money. That's when he commits fraud, and that's when we can arrest him." My stomach dropped as I realized the implications. My wife's parents. They're retired, they have savings, they own their home outright. They were hanging on his every word last night, asking about investment opportunities. Detective Hayes nodded grimly. "Based on our surveillance, your in-laws fit his victim profile perfectly. We believe he's planning to extract a significant sum from them very soon." The detective explained that they'd been monitoring Marcus's activities but needed more evidence to build an airtight case. They knew he was planning something major with his current target family, but they needed him to actually commit the crime before they could act. "This is where you come in, Lance," Detective Hayes said. "We need someone with access to Marcus and your family who can help us gather the evidence we need. Someone he trusts enough to speak freely around." I thought about the engagement party planned for the following weekend, where Marcus would undoubtedly continue his psychological manipulation of my family. The idea of working undercover terrified me, but the alternative was watching my in-laws lose everything they'd worked for their entire lives. "What would I need to do?" I asked. Detective Hayes explained they could outfit me with a sophisticated recording device disguised as a fitness tracker. My job would be attending family events and engaging Marcus in conversations that might reveal incriminating details about his operation. They needed him to admit specifics about how he moved money, created false documents, or recruited victims. The engagement party would be perfect, Detective Hayes said. "He'll be relaxed, celebrating, probably bringing potential new victims to meet your family. If we're lucky, he'll reveal enough information to justify an arrest warrant." Just as I was processing this information, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Marcus is taking Emma mom and dad to look at investment properties this afternoon. He says it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Isn't it exciting?" I showed the message to Detective Hayes, who immediately stood up and started making phone calls. "We need to move faster than expected," he told me. "If he's already moving to the investment phase, your family could lose their money within days." The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I was the only person who could protect my family from this predator, even though they'd made it clear they didn't value my opinion or judgment. My wife was choosing Marcus's wealth over my integrity, but I still had to save her parents from financial destruction. Detective Hayes worked with frightening efficiency. Within 2 hours, I found myself back at the police station being fitted with recording equipment by a technician who explained the device in detail. The recording unit was built into what appeared to be a standard fitness tracker, indistinguishable from the millions worn by health-conscious Americans. The battery lasts 12 hours and the memory can store up to 6 hours of high-quality audio, the technician explained while adjusting the band on my wrist. "Just press the side button twice quickly to start recording and press it 3 times to stop. The LED light will pulse once to confirm it's working." I practiced the activation sequence until it became automatic. Detective Hayes briefed me on techniques for eliciting information without appearing suspicious. Asking innocent questions about Marcus's business, expressing admiration for his success, showing interest in learning from his expertise. "Remember, you're not trying to trap him," Detective Hayes emphasized. "You're just a curious brother-in-law who's impressed by his lifestyle. Let his ego do the work. Guys like Marcus love bragging about how clever they are." The engagement party was scheduled for Saturday evening at an upscale restaurant Marcus insisted on paying for. According to Emma, he'd invited several wealthy couples I didn't recognize, claiming they were business associates who wanted to celebrate his engagement. Detective Hayes suspected these were potential new victims being introduced to the family for credibility. I spent the week researching investment fraud techniques online, learning about red flags and common tactics used by financial predators. The more I read, the more perfectly Marcus fit the profile. The vague business descriptions, the pressure for quick decisions, the promise of returns that defied market logic. Saturday arrived with Arizona's typical desert heat. Sarah and I drove to the restaurant in tense silence, our relationship strained by the previous week's events. She'd grown increasingly distant, spending time with Emma and Marcus planning their new life while barely speaking to her husband. The restaurant was exactly the type of place Marcus would choose, expensive, impressive, with a private dining room that allowed for intimate conversation. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over linen tablecloths, and the waitstaff moved with professional discretion that suggested high prices and exclusive clientele. Marcus had arrived early and was holding court at the head of a long table, wearing another perfectly tailored suit and that expensive watch. Emma glowed beside him in a designer dress that probably cost more than our monthly rent. The ring on her finger caught the light with every gesture, a constant reminder of the wealth now flowing into our family. The other guests were exactly what Detective Hayes had predicted. Well-dressed older couples with the confident bearing of people accustomed to financial success. I recognized one pair from the local news as retired executives who'd recently won a significant lawsuit settlement. Another couple mentioned inheriting money from elderly parents who'd passed away the previous year. "Lance," Marcus called out as we approached the table. "Come meet some friends of mine. These are people who understand real wealth creation, not like those public school teachers who think small." The insult stung, but I forced a smile and shook hands with his guests. Marcus introduced me as Emma's brother-in-law, who's finally ready to learn about serious business opportunities. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, but I played along, asking innocent questions about their backgrounds and interests. During the appetizer course, Marcus began what was essentially a sales presentation disguised as casual conversation. He pulled out glossy brochures showing luxury developments in Dubai, Costa Rica, and Monaco. The photographs were stunning. Oceanfront resorts, mountain retreats, urban towers with infinity pools and helicopter pads. "These aren't available to the general public," Marcus explained, spreading the materials across the table. "My company has exclusive access to pre-construction investments that guarantee minimum returns of 30% annually. Most of our clients see 50 to 60% growth in the first year alone." I discreetly pressed the recording device's activation button and began asking the questions Detective Hayes had suggested. "Marcus, those returns sound incredible. How do you guarantee such high profits when most investments carry significant risk?" Marcus's answer was a masterpiece of confident vagueness. He mentioned proprietary market analysis, exclusive developer relationships, and insider knowledge of emerging markets. When pressed for specifics, he deflected with charm and promised detailed explanations after everyone signed non-disclosure agreements. "The key is getting in early before these opportunities become public knowledge," he said. "Once government regulations catch up or media attention increases, the profit margins shrink dramatically. We're talking about ground floor access to developments that will reshape entire economies." Sarah leaned forward with obvious fascination. "What kind of minimum investment are we talking about?" "Not that Lance and I have much saved up, but maybe we could participate somehow." My heart sank as I watched my wife being drawn into Marcus's web. He assured her that family members received special consideration, that he could find ways to include them even with modest savings accounts. The warmth in his voice contrasted sharply with the cold calculation I'd learned to recognize in his eyes. Robert and Linda arrived fashionably late, apologizing for traffic while clearly impressed by the restaurant's opulence. Marcus immediately stood to greet them, kissing Linda's cheek and shaking Robert's hand like they were honored guests rather than potential victims. "I was just explaining to everyone how exclusive real estate development works," Marcus said, guiding them to seats near the head of the table. "After our property tour this week, I think you understand the incredible potential we're looking at." My blood chilled as I realized Marcus had already taken them to see fabricated investment opportunities. Detective Hayes had warned this was how the scheme typically accelerated, showing victims impressive properties that were either not for sale or already owned by other investors, then claiming exclusive access through non-existent connections. Throughout dinner, Marcus continued his psychological manipulation with surgical precision. He spoke about previous clients who'd trusted him with everything and were now living like royalty across Europe and the Caribbean. He mentioned a retired couple from California who'd invested their entire retirement account and now owned vineyard estates in France. "The beauty of wealth creation is that money makes more money exponentially," Marcus explained. $100,000 becomes $300,000 in year 1, then $900,000 in year 2. By year 3, you're looking at multiple millions in passive income alone. The mathematics were obviously impossible, but Marcus presented them with such confidence that everyone nodded along. These were intelligent, successful people being systematically deceived by a master manipulator who understood exactly which psychological buttons to press. As the evening progressed, I watched Marcus work the room like a conductor leading an orchestra. He'd compliment Robert's business acumen. praise Linda's wisdom in financial planning, then seamlessly transition into how their careful savings could be transformed into generational wealth through his exclusive opportunities. "I don't usually take on new clients," Marcus confided during dessert. "My current portfolio is fully subscribed, but Emma's family deserves special consideration. I'm willing to make an exception for people I genuinely care about." The false intimacy in his voice made my skin crawl, but I could see its effect on my family. They felt chosen, special, worthy of access to opportunities beyond their normal reach. Marcus had successfully transformed their middle-class insecurities into gratitude for his attention. Emma noticed me asking questions and pulled Marcus aside during a break between courses. I couldn't hear their conversation, but she gestured in my direction several times with obvious concern. When they returned, Marcus's demeanor toward me had shifted, subtly becoming more guarded while maintaining his surface charm. "Lance, Emma mentioned you've been asking a lot of questions tonight," Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I appreciate curiosity, but some aspects of my business require confidentiality agreements before I can share details." I played the role of an impressed but naive teacher, expressing admiration for his success and apologizing if I'd overstepped boundaries. "I'm just fascinated by how you've built such an incredible business. Coming from education, I don't understand the investment world at all." Marcus's ego responded exactly as Detective Hayes had predicted. "Actually, Lance, I've been thinking about our conversation last week. You mentioned having a master's degree in environmental science, right?" Huh. I nodded, wondering where this was leading. "I might have a proposition that could change your life completely," Marcus said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "But it would require absolute discretion and total commitment to a new career path." The engagement party was winding down, but Marcus asked me to stay behind for a private conversation that would reveal the true depth of his criminal operation and change everything I thought I knew about protecting my family. After most guests had departed, Marcus guided me to a quiet corner booth where soft jazz music provided cover for our conversation. Emma and Sarah were saying goodbye to the remaining couples, leaving us alone for the first time that evening. Marcus's entire demeanor shifted as he leaned forward with predatory intensity. "Lance, I'll be direct with you." He began, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I know you think I'm just some rich guy trying to impress everyone, but there's more to this story than expensive cars and designer suits." I forced myself to appear intrigued rather than terrified, leaning forward as if eager to hear his secrets. The recording device felt heavy on my wrist as I pressed the activation button beneath the table. "What I'm about to offer you could triple your income overnight," Marcus continued, "but it requires leaving teaching permanently and joining my organization in a very specialized capacity." He explained that his business needed someone with legitimate scientific credentials to add credibility to certain investment opportunities. My environmental science background would be perfect for creating documentation that investors required before committing large sums to green energy projects. "The work is simple," Marcus said. "You'd prepare environmental impact reports and sustainability assessments for our renewable energy developments. Solar farms, wind installations, geothermal plants, all cutting-edge technology that attracts environmentally conscious investors." My stomach turned as I realized he wanted me to fabricate scientific documents supporting non-existent green energy projects. What kind of salary would this involve? $200,000 annually plus performance bonuses that could double that figure, Marcus replied without hesitation. "You'd travel to investor presentations, explain the environmental benefits of our projects, and help close deals that benefit everyone involved." The offer was more than triple my teaching salary, enough to transform our modest lifestyle into something approaching Marcus's apparent wealth. For a moment, I felt genuine temptation. Sarah would be thrilled, our financial worries would disappear, and I could finally provide the lifestyle my wife secretly craved. But Detective Hayes's words echoed in my memory. Marcus destroyed families for profit, stealing retirement savings from elderly couples who trusted him with their financial future. The money he was offering came from victims like Robert and Linda, people who'd worked honest jobs their entire lives, only to be swindled by a charismatic sociopath. "That's an incredible opportunity," I said, maintaining my facade of interested curiosity. "How exactly would the environmental reports work? Would I be analyzing real projects or theoretical developments?" Marcus's answer revealed the full scope of his fraud with chilling clarity. He described shell companies that existed only on paper, fake geological surveys showing non-existent mineral deposits, and fabricated government permits for projects that would never be built. My role would be creating scientific-sounding documents that gave investors confidence in opportunities that were completely fraudulent. "The beauty of environmental projects is that they sound so legitimate," Marcus explained with obvious pride in his deception. "Investors want to feel good about putting money into solar farms and wind turbines. When you present the environmental benefits with scientific authority, they stop asking difficult questions about financial projections." He pulled out his phone and showed me examples of previous environmental assessments, professional-looking documents with charts, graphs, and technical language that appeared convincing to anyone without scientific training. The reports promised massive carbon dioxide reductions, habitat preservation, and sustainable energy production that would benefit local communities for generations. These projects raised over $5 million from environmentally conscious investors. Marcus said, swiping through photographs of happy couples signing investment contracts. "Every one of them believes they're saving the planet while making money." I thought about those investors, probably retired teachers and social workers who'd dedicated their lives to helping others, now losing their savings to Marcus's elaborate lies. What happened to the money they invested? Marcus's laugh was cold and predatory. The money went exactly where it was supposed to go. Into accounts that generate real returns for people smart enough to understand how the game actually works. He described the systematic process of identifying and grooming victims with disturbing clinical detachment. Elderly couples were particularly vulnerable because they had substantial savings but limited understanding of modern investment markets. Environmental projects appealed to their desire to leave a positive legacy while generating income for retirement. "The key is making them feel special, like they're getting access to opportunities beyond their normal reach," Marcus explained. "Show them a lifestyle they've always wanted. Promise them financial security they've never experienced, and they'll hand over everything willingly." I forced myself to nod appreciatively while fighting nausea at his casual description of destroying innocent lives. "How do you identify the best targets?" "Social connections are everything," Marcus replied. "Date someone from an affluent family, attend their gatherings. Identify who has money and who's susceptible to influence. Your in-laws are perfect examples. Comfortable middle-class savings, own their home, outright trust family recommendations, and desperately want to believe they can improve their financial situation." The recording device captured every word as Marcus outlined his strategy for extracting Robert and Linda's retirement savings. He'd already convinced them to consider refinancing their house for additional investment capital, doubling the amount he could steal from their modest lifestyle. "Emma's engagement provides perfect cover," Marcus continued. "They want to help their daughter's future husband, they trust my financial expertise, and they see other family members getting involved. Social pressure eliminates most of their natural caution." Sarah appeared at our table, her face glowing with excitement about the evening's conversations. "Marcus, thank you so much for including us in your world tonight. Those other couples seemed so successful and happy." Marcus smiled warmly at my wife, while his hand briefly touched her arm in a gesture that seemed innocent but felt possessive. "Sarah, you and Lance are family now. I take care of family in ways that create lasting prosperity for everyone." He turned back to me with renewed intensity. "Lance, I need an answer about my job offer by tomorrow evening. We're moving forward with some major opportunities this week, and timing is crucial in this business." Sarah's eyes widened as she learned about the job offer for the first time. "Lance, he's offering you a position with his company." "That's incredible." $200,000 annually to start, Marcus said, watching Sarah's reaction carefully. "Plus bonuses, travel opportunities, and the chance to work on projects that actually matter to the environment." I watched my wife's face transform as she processed this information. Her expression showed hope, excitement, and something that looked like relief. Finally, her husband might become someone worthy of respect rather than a source of embarrassment at family gatherings. "You have to take this opportunity," Sarah whispered urgently. "Lance, this could change our entire lives." Marcus's satisfied smile told me everything I needed to know about his psychological manipulation. He'd successfully used my wife's frustrations with our financial situation to pressure me into becoming an accomplice to his crimes. "There's just one thing," Marcus added casually. "I'll need you to resign from teaching immediately to demonstrate full commitment to this new career path. Half measures don't work in high-stakes business." The trap was perfectly designed. Abandon my teaching career and moral principles to join his criminal organization, or disappoint my wife who'd finally found hope for escape from our modest circumstances. "Can I have until tomorrow evening to make my decision?" I asked. "Of course," Marcus replied, "but understand that opportunities like this don't wait for people who can't make decisive choices. Success requires commitment and courage." As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus made one final revelation that would haunt me through the sleepless night ahead. He pulled me aside while Sarah gathered her purse and jacket. "Lance, there's something else you should know," he said quietly. "Sarah and I have already discussed her involvement in our business ventures. She signed some preliminary documents for our joint environmental consulting firm. She'll be making good money regardless of your decision." My blood turned to ice as I realized Marcus had been systematically separating me from my wife while positioning himself as her financial salvation. Sarah had become involved in his schemes without understanding their criminal nature, making her an unwitting accomplice who could face legal consequences when his operation collapsed. The drive home passed in stunned silence as I processed the magnitude of the trap closing around my family. Marcus wasn't just planning to steal Robert and Linda's retirement savings. He was destroying my marriage and potentially making my wife an accessory to fraud. Tomorrow's family brunch would be when Robert and Linda signed investment documents and handed over their life savings. I had less than 18 hours to stop a master manipulator from destroying everyone I loved, while somehow preserving my family relationships and protecting my wife from criminal liability. Detective Hayes needed to know about these latest developments immediately. I called Detective Hayes at 6 in the morning, knowing the urgency couldn't wait for business hours. He answered on the second ring, already alert, despite the early hour. The weight of our conversation from the previous night had clearly kept him awake as well. "Marcus is moving faster than we anticipated," I told him, explaining the job offer and Sarah's involvement in preliminary business documents. "He's planning to extract my in-laws' money today at the family brunch." Detective Hayes was already mobilizing his team as we spoke. "We've been monitoring electronic surveillance all night. Marcus made several phone calls after the restaurant, including one to someone he called his cleanup specialist, who handles document disposal and account transfers." The detective explained that they'd obtained an arrest warrant based on evidence from previous victims, but they needed Marcus to actually accept Robert and Linda's investment money before they could charge him with fraud against my family specifically. Until that moment, everything remained technically legal, despite being morally reprehensible. "The plan is simple," Detective Hayes said. "You wear the recording equipment to the brunch and keep everyone calm while we position our team around your in-laws' house. The moment Marcus accepts their check or signed documents, we move in for the arrest." I arrived at the police station by 7 for final briefing and equipment check. The recording device was functioning perfectly, and Detective Hayes' technical team had added a hidden camera disguised as a pen in my shirt pocket. Everything Marcus said and did would be captured in high-quality audio and video. "Remember, your job is to act normal and prevent anyone from getting suspicious," Detective Hayes emphasized. "Don't try to be a hero or confront Marcus directly. Just document everything and let us handle the arrest when it's legally justified." The drive to Robert and Linda's house felt like traveling to my own execution. Sarah had left early for what she called a strategy meeting, with Marcus about their business partnership, leaving me alone with my thoughts and growing dread about the day's events. I arrived at my in-laws' familiar ranch house to find several expensive cars already parked in the driveway. Marcus's Maserati sat beside a silver Bentley and a black BMW I didn't recognize, suggesting he'd brought additional witnesses or potential victims to the signing ceremony. Inside, the atmosphere was celebratory despite the morning hour. Linda had prepared an elaborate brunch spread with fresh flowers on the dining room table where legal documents were arranged in neat stacks. The scene looked like a business, closing at a law firm rather than a family gathering. Marcus commanded the space in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his confidence radiating as he directed conversations and managed the flow of activities. Sarah stood beside him, wearing a new dress I'd never seen, her demeanor transformed into someone I barely recognized, polished, sophisticated, and completely captivated by the wealth surrounding her. Emma glowed with pride as she introduced me to Marcus's associates, all impeccably dressed professionals who spoke knowledgeably about investment strategies and wealth management. One introduced himself as Marcus's attorney, another as his accountant, and the third as his business development director. "Lance," Marcus called out warmly. "Perfect timing. We're just reviewing the final documentation for your in-laws' participation in our Costa Rica resort development." He guided me to the dining room table where Robert and Linda sat studying contracts with obvious excitement. The documents appeared professionally prepared with official letterhead legal disclaimers and detailed project descriptions that would convince anyone without expertise in fraud detection. "This is incredible, Lance," Robert said, looking up with genuine enthusiasm. "Marcus is including us in a development project that's going to transform an entire region of Costa Rica. Sustainable luxury resorts that protect the environment while generating substantial returns for investors." I activated the recording device while pretending to examine the contracts Marcus handed me. The documentation was impressively detailed, complete with architectural renderings, environmental impact assessments, and financial projections promising 40% annual returns. "These numbers look amazing," I said, playing my role as the impressed brother-in-law. "Marcus, how do you guarantee such high returns when most investments carry significant risk?" Marcus's explanation was a masterpiece of confident deception, describing exclusive access to pristine beachfront property government partnerships that eliminated regulatory delays and pre-construction pricing that locked in massive profit margins. Every detail sounded plausible to anyone without expertise in real estate development or international investment law. "The key is getting involved before public awareness increases property values," Marcus explained. "Once these resorts open and start attracting celebrity guests, the land becomes worth 10 times what we're paying today." Linda asked practical questions about timeline and safety of their investment. Marcus assured her that their money would be held in escrow accounts managed by established banks with full legal protections and insurance coverage that guaranteed return of principal even in worst-case scenarios. "We've done this successfully in Monaco, the Bahamas, and Dubai," Marcus said, showing photographs of supposedly completed projects. "Our investors in those developments are now receiving quarterly dividend payments that exceed most people's annual salaries." The photographs were convincing. Luxury resorts with infinity pools overlooking pristine beaches, golf courses carved into dramatic coastlines, and happy guests enjoying paradise that Marcus's expertise had created from undeveloped land. Sarah approached the table with obvious excitement about finalizing the family's participation. Marcus explained how this investment will secure Mom and Dad's retirement while creating legacy wealth for future generations, she said, looking at me expectantly. "Isn't this exactly what we've always hoped for?" I watched my wife's face as she absorbed the promise of financial security that had eluded our modest lifestyle. Marcus had successfully convinced her that this opportunity represented salvation from middle-class limitations, a chance to join the wealthy elite she'd always envied. "The timing couldn't be better," Marcus continued. "Construction begins next month, which means early investors receive the maximum profit potential. Anyone joining after groundbreaking pays significantly higher prices for the same returns. Robert pulled out a cashier's check representing their entire retirement savings, $450,000 accumulated through 30 years of careful budgeting and conservative investments. Linda signed documents authorizing the refinancing of their house to access an additional $200,000 in investment capital. "This represents everything we've worked for our entire lives," Robert said solemnly. "But Marcus has shown us how to transform our modest savings into real wealth that will benefit Emma and Sarah for generations." The weight of watching my family's financial destruction happen in real time was almost unbearable. These were good people who'd lived honest lives now being systematically deceived by a predator who saw their life savings as nothing more than operating capital for his next scheme. Marcus accepted their documents with practiced solemnity, promising that their trust would be rewarded with returns beyond their wildest dreams. He explained the wire transfer process that would move their money into secure investment accounts within 24 hours. Just as Robert handed over the check representing his life's work, my phone rang with a call from Detective Hayes. Everyone turned to look as I answered, pretending to be surprised by the interruption. "Detective Hayes," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You need to speak with me about what—" I put the phone on speaker as planned, allowing Detective Hayes' authoritative voice to fill the dining room. "Lance, I apologize for interrupting your family gathering, but we have urgent questions about Martin Rodriguez, also known as Marcus Castellanos. We believe he may be attempting to defraud your family of their retirement savings." The silence that followed was deafening as everyone processed this shocking revelation. Marcus's confident expression flickered for just a moment before his practiced charm reasserted itself, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes as he evaluated escape options. The transformation in the room was instantaneous and electric. Robert's hand froze halfway to Marcus, while Linda's face drained of color as she processed Detective Hayes' words. Sarah looked confused, glancing between the phone and Marcus, as if trying to understand how this nightmare could be real. "Everyone remain calm," I said, looking directly at Marcus while addressing my family. "I've been working with the Financial Crimes Unit for the past week investigating Marcus's background. His real name is Martin Rodriguez, and he's wanted in connection with investment fraud across multiple states." Marcus immediately shifted into damage control mode, his charming facade cracking to reveal the predator underneath. "This is clearly a misunderstanding," he said with forced confidence. "Lance must be jealous of our success and fabricated this entire situation to sabotage Emma's happiness." I pulled out my phone and opened the police database photos Detective Hayes had shown me earlier. These are surveillance images from fraud investigations in California, Nevada, and Arizona. Same person, different names. Martin Castellanos, Marcus Williams, Michael Carbone. Emma stared at the photos in growing horror as she recognized her fiancé's face associated with multiple criminal aliases. "Marcus, what is this? Why do the police have pictures of you under different names?" Instead of answering, Marcus tried to maintain control through aggressive denial. "These photos could be anyone. Lance is obviously having some kind of mental breakdown and dragging you all into his delusions." But his protestations sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. I activated the recording device playback function, filling the room with Marcus's own voice from the previous evening, describing how he targeted greedy idiots and destroyed families for profit. "That's your voice explaining how you steal retirement savings from elderly couples," I said as the family listened in stunned silence. "You called victims greedy idiots who deserved to lose everything, and bragged about couples who lost their homes because of your schemes." The recording continued with Marcus detailing his methodology: fake environmental reports, non-existent development projects, and systematic psychological manipulation of vulnerable families. His contempt for victims was clear in every word, destroying any remaining doubt about his true nature. Sarah's face showed a mixture of horror and dawning realization as she understood how completely she'd been manipulated. "The business documents you had me sign," she whispered. "What were they really for?" "Bank account authorizations using your name and social security number," I explained gently. "He was setting you up as an unwitting accomplice to money laundering operations." Detective Hayes and his team arrived within minutes, their vehicles surrounding the house with professional efficiency. Marcus tried to bolt for the backyard but found plainclothes officers already positioned at every exit. When they tackled him on Robert's carefully maintained lawn, his expensive suit tore and his perfect hair became disheveled, revealing the desperate criminal beneath the polished exterior. "You're all pathetic losers," Marcus screamed as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Living in your middle-class mediocrity while people like me understand how the world really works." His true background emerged during the arrest process. Martin Rodriguez, from a working-class family in East Los Angeles, never finished high school, had been running various scams since his teenage years. The wealthy businessman persona was as fabricated as his investment opportunities. Emma collapsed into tears as she processed the complete betrayal. The engagement ring that had symbolized her fairy tale romance was actually purchased with money stolen from previous victims. A retired teacher in California who'd lost her pension savings and ended up homeless. "I thought I'd finally found someone who loved me," Emma sobbed. "But he was just using me to get access to our family's money." Detective Hayes revealed that Marcus had been simultaneously engaged to women in Phoenix, Tucson, and Las Vegas, planning to extract money from all their families before disappearing with a new identity. Each woman believed she was his only love, while serving as bait for his criminal operation. The investigation's scope became clear as Detective Hayes explained how my evidence had helped them arrest Marcus's entire network. 6 associates who handled different aspects of the fraud operation. My recordings had provided crucial information about money laundering, document forgery, and victim identification that would put the entire organization in federal prison. "Your courage saved not just your family, but dozens of other potential victims," Detective Hayes told me. "We estimate this network would have stolen over $10 million before moving to new territories." Robert and Linda were shaken but profoundly grateful that their life savings remained secure. They apologized repeatedly for dismissing my concerns and treating me with disrespect during Marcus's manipulation campaign. "We were so impressed by his confidence and success that we stopped thinking critically," Robert admitted. "You saved us from losing everything we've worked for our entire lives." The family's attitude toward me transformed completely as they realized my teaching career represented integrity and service rather than failure to achieve wealth. My commitment to scientific truth, protection of vulnerable people, and moral principles had proven more valuable than any material success. Sarah's redemption began with a tearful confession about how deeply Marcus had influenced her thinking. "I was so ashamed of our modest lifestyle that I lost sight of what really matters," she said through tears. "Your character, your dedication to helping others, your willingness to fight for what's right, that's real wealth." She burned the business documents Marcus had convinced her to sign and apologized for prioritizing material desires over our marriage. I almost threw away the best thing in my life for the promise of money that was built on destroying other people. The legal aftermath unfolded over several months as Marcus's case went to federal court. He was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and racketeering. Several victims attended the sentencing hearing to thank me personally for stopping his operation. Emma required therapy to process the psychological manipulation she'd experienced, but she emerged stronger with a better understanding of authentic relationships versus predatory exploitation. She eventually met and married a social worker whose modest income came from genuine service to others. The family dynamics shifted permanently as everyone gained new appreciation for integrity over appearance, character over wealth, and authentic relationships over superficial attractions. Our monthly dinners became celebrations of genuine accomplishment and mutual support, rather than competitions about material success. 6 months later, I received a Teaching Excellence Award for my environmental science program, which had inspired several students to pursue careers in climate research and renewable energy. The ceremony was attended by my entire extended family, who now understood that education and scientific truth were valuable contributions to society. Sarah had returned to school to pursue her own teaching certification, inspired by my dedication to helping others learn and grow. Our modest apartment felt spacious and comfortable when filled with love and mutual respect, rather than resentment about financial limitations. The most profound change was internal. I no longer needed external validation to feel valuable or successful. My work as a teacher, my commitment to scientific truth, and my willingness to protect vulnerable people defined my worth, regardless of salary or social status. During Marcus's trial, I testified about his manipulation techniques and the psychological damage inflicted on victims who trusted him with their financial futures. The judge commended my courage in stopping a sophisticated criminal operation that had destroyed countless families across multiple states. Real wealth isn't measured in bank account balances or expensive possessions, I told the court during my victim impact statement. It comes from knowing you've made the world better through your choices and actions. The experience taught our entire family that authentic success means living with integrity, protecting those who can't protect themselves, and building relationships based on genuine love rather than material benefits. We learned that character cannot be purchased. Respect must be earned through actions, and true security comes from moral principles that guide decisions even when doing the right thing requires personal sacrifice. Marcus's downfall became a cautionary tale shared widely in financial education seminars about recognizing investment fraud. My recordings were used by law enforcement agencies to train officers in detecting sophisticated Ponzi schemes that target middle-class families through social manipulation. 1 year later, as Sarah and I celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary in our same modest apartment, we reflected on how Marcus's attempted destruction of our family had actually strengthened every relationship and clarified our values. We'd learned that love, integrity, and mutual respect create wealth that no criminal can steal and no economic downturn can diminish. The greatest satisfaction came from knowing that my students continued benefiting from environmental science education that prepared them to think critically about complex issues and stand up for scientific truth even when popular opinion disagreed. Teaching remained my calling, not because other opportunities were unavailable, but because helping young minds develop represented the most valuable work possible. Our family gatherings now focus on gratitude for authentic relationships, appreciation for honest work, regardless of salary level, and pride in contributing to society through service, rather than seeking personal enrichment at others' expense. We learned that real security comes from character, genuine wealth flows from integrity, and true success means sleeping peacefully, knowing your choices have made the world better. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where standing up for what's right required risking important relationships? How do you balance family loyalty with moral principles when the people you love are being deceived? I'd love to hear your thoughts about protecting loved ones who might not want your protection. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that your character and integrity are worth more than any material wealth someone else might promise. Remember to question opportunities that seem too good to be true. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and never compromise your values for money or approval. Stay strong in your convictions, protect those who need your help, and always choose the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges, share it with someone who might benefit from hearing about the power of standing up for truth, and leave a comment about your own experiences with difficult family situations. Your engagement helps these important messages reach people who need to hear them most.